Welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Rates. I'm your host, and I'm excited that you're joining us today. This podcast exists because at Speak with People, we really believe that words matter, and the world can be changed through healthy communication. And so we hope that this time that you have with us will be fun, will be engaging, but also be challenging and encouraging you to choose words that bring life, that lift people up, that speak life into people instead of dismantling their day and dragging them down. So today I'm with a first-time co-host on the Speak with People podcast, Christy Lauscher.
First time ever. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's so nice to have you.
It's so nice to be here.
We've known each other now, it's 2 years. It is 2 years plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I don't know if we're in that best friend zone yet, but probably not.
I don't know if we've cried together a couple times.
But it's not too bad. Well, I'm so glad that you're joining us today. Just for a kick, tell our audience who you are, what you do, all that kind of stuff.
My name's Christy. I'm a wife and a mother of 3 young adults.
Young adults? I was thinking teenagers.
I know. Well, thank you.
12, 14, 15, somewhere. No? Okay.
No, much older. Son-in-law. We have a son-in-law
Wow.
now, so that's exciting. I've been on church staff, working with youth and children's ministry, and currently I am a Enneagram coach.
All right. All right.
Yeah, and I work with Speak with People.
There you go. I love that earlier I tried to convince you that I was another number than 4, and you're like, no, you're definitely a 4. You're like the stereotypical 4. So if you don't know,
that's great, though.
If you don't know much about the Enneagram, we'll put Christy's coaching information in the show notes. Make sure you go check out what she does because it's really awesome and how you're helping people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a useful tool. So.
Well, today's podcast, we are talking about all things change and transitions.
Fun.
Changes, it could be exciting. It could be exhilarating. It could be like the thought of change could be so huge. And then
it could be traumatic. It could be terrifying.
It could be dismantling.
Yes.
It could be in the corner crying.
Yeah.
So if you're going through some type of change or transition right now, I think this will be a great conversation.
For sure.
If you've been through it, we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. So please comment those, below. And we'd love that. But today, as we kind of talk about this, in the course of our lives, we go through so many different changes and transitions with our family, with our school, with our life, our work, our friends. And so we really kind of want to drill down. We'll talk about transitions and change a little bit, but the bigger part of it is we really want to drill down of how do we communicate those transitions?
Yeah, that's
because
really important.
That is the difficult part. How much is the right amount to share? When do I bring it up to people? What if I forget to tell somebody close to me? Have you been there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oops.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to tell you that,
right.
we adopted a son.
Yeah.
Surprise. We went to China and everything. I don't know how you missed that. But anyways, that was a real life story. Hit a little close to home. Sorry. But what if I do that? How do I communicate why I'm going through this transition? Those kind of things. And then if it's like a super glorious transition, how do I not seem too excited so I don't hurt or offend the people that I'm leaving? Oh, this is a difficult.
There's a lot.
It's a lot.
For
it's
sure.
a lot. So thank you for joining us. We're just going to dive right in and talk through this because this is just a really tough time. And you think about communicating transitions nowadays. A big component of it involves social media.
It really does, yeah. You have to consider that and put that in your plan. Almost.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't have to think about that. I mean, you could have gone through a job change or moved states, and it would have been years until even a good friend found out. And you're like, oh, when did you move to San Diego?
Or you'd put that in the Christmas letter that you'd send out to people.
The Christmas letter. Every year I've wanted to write. I want to give a shout out to my brother-in-law, Jason. This is a true story. I have 2 brother-in-laws. Do I have more than 2 brother-in-laws? I think I may have 2 more than. I just have 2 brother-in-laws. Thank you. Their both name is Jason.
Wow.
And their both last names start with the letter R. So
that can get confusing.
All 3 of us are R's. But the oldest Jason R him and his family sent a Christmas letter for years, and it was so much fun. He's funny. He's got the comedic traits and all that kind of stuff, and so we really looked forward to getting that one. There was other Christmas letters that were like, oh, bless your heart, but his was great. So shout out, Jason. I don't know if you listen to the podcast, but your family, you really should. Anyways. But, I mean, these kind of things can be exhilarating, painful, exhausting. And so how do we, communicate them? So let's just back up. So how do we, identify if we're entering into a season of possible transition or change? That's the, boy, that's the first question. Right. And I especially get that a lot as people, as we're doing coaching and things like that. Right. People are like, how do I know if I need to move on? How do I know if I got to go?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's really obvious. Like you get fired or in a different realm, like becoming empty nesters. That's a huge transition. Your kids actually just grow up, so you see those times approaching. So it's coming. Yes. Sometimes you don't always know that it's coming if you get fired, but sometimes you can really feel like there's just something not right with where I'm at.
Yeah. And especially in relationships, I was thinking sometimes with friends, like you can get that spidey sense. That's like
unsettling feeling, like something's going on here.
Something's coming to an end.
Yeah.
When it comes specifically to work, there's a great book by Jeff Henderson called Next. And he really helps you walk through, all of those questions. How do I know I'm thinking right about moving on? Why should I move on? What do I look for? I mean, we're kind of in the time right now too, where you see it all over the news that we're in the Great Resignation and people are quitting their jobs and transitioning and leaving. So it's hard. It leaves like wakes of people excited for you, people hurt by you. I was thinking too, I don't know if you ever heard of Ken Coleman. He works for the Dave Ramsey Solution, that whole company.
Right.
But Ken has a whole YouTube channel where he just talks about career moves and how to apply for a new job and how to respond if you don't get the raise or the promotion and those kind of things. So those are absolutely two great, resources to be able to do. But I think you hit it right on the bat. We identify this new season because, we've seen it coming. I think the majority of the time we can kind of see it coming. There are those seasons. We had a really tough season as a family when I was 18 or 19 and a few of our relatives were killed in a car accident. You don't see that coming.
No.
Ooh, and you can, that was more than 25 years ago, and I can go back to that day, that kind of change, like, it rattles your world.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that kind of change you can't see is coming, but you can identify, especially sometimes with work or friendships or relationships. So how do we know? Okay, I'm walking through this transition. Okay, how do I know it's right?
Right.
That's the difficult part. Like, how do I know it's right, or how do I know that I need to make this change? Like, that's where it's like, okay.
Right.
It's difficult.
Well, I think, talking about that podcast that you referred to with Ken Coleman and just the different books, and I think reaching out for help helps a lot, and researching a little bit, and I would say I would put it as getting godly counsel.
Yep. So who do you pick? Like, because that's you definitely need somebody. You need somebody. You need that counsel. Somebody who's kind of been through what you've been through, and maybe have experienced it.
Right.
So finding that person in your life, is it a mentor?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I go to more than one of those resources. Having a good mentor or a person that of good character that has wisdom and has been through transitions.
Yes.
Definitely, they would be top on the list.
Yep, and they've been faithful to you. They've been by your side. They're constant encouragers.
Right.
They've had the hard conversations with you when you've needed to have the hard conversation.
Yes.
Like, hey, by the way, when you said that online, that kind of thing.
Right.
Is definitely tough.
Right.
So you have that person. You're starting to talk through, this potential transition. So let's talk about why it's so important to communicate. Why is it so important? That's the tough part. I think because if we don't communicate what we're feeling, thinking about deciding, I mean, it's all gonna build up.
Right.
And if we don't communicate about it and we don't lay it out and get that wise counsel and figure it out, then we get there. I think also, when I think about transitions or change, especially professionally or, just places, even in my own personal life that I see need desperate change. I always think about like, what's my threshold? What's my threshold? Like, so if I don't get to that threshold, maybe I don't feel the urgency, or I don't feel the need to really, pursue the change like I should. And so I think for each person, each leader, that threshold is, at different places.
Right.
And so if I'm not communicating with someone and I'm not talking it out, maybe I'm going to just skyrocket up that threshold and be at a place where I'm like, oh no, this is, it's all going to come crashing down.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's when some of that good counsel comes in and can help you talk you down and give you guidance and help navigate through changes. So, yeah, I think you need those relationships and need that wisdom that other people and other books can give you.
Yeah. I can remember it was probably 2005. Somewhere in there. And I was interviewing at a really large, kind of my dream place to work. And I couldn't believe it. And it was just amazing. I remember going out for a 3-day interview, and I went through their HR process, and I had, multiple interviews. It was probably 15 interviews over the course of 3 days.
That's
they ran me through an MMPI, is that what it's called? A psychological, every test.
Wow.
It's like 500 questions, true or false. And you're like sitting in a room filling this out, and you're like, about halfway through, you're like, I don't
questioning everything in your life.
Yeah,
right?
I'm like, I don't even. There was questions like you're standing on a bridge and you look over. Do you think about jumping? And
wow.
Like, no. And then 10 questions later, it's like you're standing on a bridge. You thought about jumping, didn't you? It was just like they would answer. And by the end of the question, you're like, am I jumping? I don't know. Did I jump? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like my dream. It was my dream. I was like, okay, I can't wait. But the problem was it was 5 hours away from home. And Tracy and I were still, I think we're still in our 20s at that point. And we were miles from my family, and we were, probably 30 minutes from her family. And just the thought of telling them, we're interviewing to move to Chicago. It was, it destroyed us. Because at one end we're so excited because we're like, we're moving to Chicago.
Yeah.
Deep dish pizza.
Right.
Wrigley Field. And then on the other end we're like, because we had a couple of grandbabies at that point.
Right. But
So
you have to communicate that.
You have to, because communication is everything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Craig Rochelle said it. I don't know if he said it or if somebody else said it, but communication builds trust.
Oh, so that's so true. I love that saying.
It just builds trust. And so even bad communication, we get into this rut sometimes where we're like, oh, I don't want to tell them because it's bad news. But it still builds trust. They might not like it. It might be hard for them. But at least at the end of the day, you can say, well, I told you about it. I communicated about it. We talked about it. So let's just talk about this, the whole function of communicating. When the decision is made, who do we tell? Who do we tell? We'll do a whole other podcast in the future, maybe more about making the actual decisions on transitions, because that's just a big giant topic in itself.
Right.
But how do we tell? And so if it's your personal life, I think it's a couple different ways. If it's your professional life, it's a couple different ways. So let's start with the personal life.
Right.
So big change, big transition coming to you personally. Let's brainstorm. Let's talk about some ideas how we can communicate to the people in our lives.
Right. Yeah. Definitely family. It's just interesting thinking about how I don't have any kids at home any longer, but yet they'd be at the top of the list, for if there was some sort of personal transition,
Yes.
Spouse, kids.
Yep. Now, coincidentally, all of my 5 children are at home. So if you miss having children in your home, we can work on a deal.
I can invite them over.
1 to 5, just let me know. we can send them over.
For sure.
But if you have any empty rooms and you need renters, they'll work it off, whatever you can do. But you're exactly right. Family should be right on the top.
Right.
And I know there's a person listening who's like, I'm not close to my family. I can never tell them. Well, okay. Well, you've got to take where you're at in life.
For sure.
For me, my family would be, top of the list.
Right. Right. And, I would encourage people, even if they aren't super close to their family, to include them at some point in that process, just as a matter of respect and having them as part of the family. So
absolutely. Yeah, those close family members. And I think the best way is just always voice to voice.
Yeah.
We communicate, we're a texting world now. We communicate through DMs, we communicate through all those ways. But nothing beats that voice to voice connection.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I think it honors people. It shows them they care. Even for people who, hate talking on the phone.
Right. Yeah.
They can still say, well, okay, they called me.
Yeah. Yep.
And they can do that.
Right.
Before we go to social media, before we send out the email.
Right.
Before we tell our best friends, start with those closest to you.
It's a way to honor the relationship that you have.
Yeah. That's just absolutely huge. And I would encourage people, if you are going through transition or you sense a big change coming, write down a list. And I would start with a small circle, and then I would put a bigger circle around it, a bigger circle, and a bigger circle. And then I would start with the 3 to 5 people in the very smallest circle who are your core. Who's your foundation? It's probably different for all of us. For me, it's my wife and kids, my parents, Tracy's parents.
Right.
That's our, and Tom Brady. That's our, and Darius Rucker. That's our core. Ryan Reynolds. Other than that, though.
Other than those, yeah.
Blake Lively. That's our core. And then I would go and I would do another circle. Okay, outside of those closest to me, who know my heart, who know my aspirations, my dreams, who believe and want the best for me, who are those next closest friends, mentors.
Right.
And then, fill out, just fill them out, put them all around the circle. And so you can actually see a visual representation. Hey, this is like my team. These are the people who, have gotten me to this point.
Right. And I think a work transition is very similar, though, don't you? Instead of just family, it's kind of like, of course your boss would know, or you would be letting your boss know, and then your coworkers, and then branching out from there and there.
Oh, for sure. Like if you're going through a work transition, probably important to tell your boss.
Right.
Right not wait till after you've told everybody else.
Yeah.
And then make it Facebook official.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way.
That would be a big oops. I forgot to mention that. We're moving. Oh,
yeah,
oops.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's a really good practice, even for your own life, to know, okay, hey, who are the people in my life who have poured into me the most and who I need to pour into. And so you can look at that chart, the different circles and go, okay, these are my people. And so call each of them, call each of them.
Right. And I know, maybe you and I are thinking, wow, that's just kind of simple, no brainer, but not everybody thinks like that, or not everybody takes the time to visualize that and to write that down and to map that out. I like that with the circles and the bigger circles. And as people, we're relational beings to one extent or another. And it's honoring and valuing other people by taking the time to communicate something about any type of transition.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just goes back to that communication builds trust. If those people in your life, if they feel like they're on your inside, you asked them advice, you brought them into it, you listened, you processed.
Right.
You honor them. It shows respect. All of that kind of stuff. And so you're just building, it's principle. I mean, you see it like the first book I ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Right.
That's not true. The first book I ever read was Red Dog. And I think we've talked about Red Dog in the podcast before.
Think we did. Yep,
we did talk about Red Dog. We don't need to talk about Red Dog again. But it's an incredible story, an incredible book. But I can remember at 18 for the first time reading how to I forgot the title now. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie. And I was thinking, this is so simple.
Right.
I thought like I had to be the smartest, I had to be the sharpest, I had to get the best grades, I had to get the best. No, like really to impact people, I just have to care for them.
Just be nice.
Yeah, and want to
Treat
help them
well.
succeed.
Right, yeah.
And so that simple practice, that chart is going to help you in so many ways, but especially as you communicate. So, all right, so we've made a personal decision, we've communicated to those people. After you call the people on that list, then it's appropriate to send a mass email or a Facebook post.
Right, yeah.
And if you're not on Facebook, whatever platform you're on,
right.
you'll do a TikTok video dancing while you do it. Which I'm one of the, crazy enough, I'm one of the only ones who do not have a TikTok.
Yeah, I got rid of mine.
Oh, you did have one?
I did for a little while.
You're very cool.
But back to the voice to voice though.
Yes.
Because I do think, just to reiterate just how important it is to actually have a conversation with somebody. And I've been on the receiving end of those, as well as having to go down the whole list. And it can be exhausting when you're trying to communicate about some transitions, more than others, I'm sure. But receiving calls like that, just made me feel so valued in that person's life. And then just with the whole situation, it helps give ownership to like, hey, I know what's going on, and I'm not just left wondering with all kinds of questions like what happened, where'd they go, they disappeared, or they never talked to me. So I think the social media post down the line, or the mass email, or TikTok, whatever, that has its place, but I think the value of the conversation is just enough to say a little bit more about.
Yeah, huge. That's huge. So the personal transitions, then the professional to work transitions. And I think for me, what I found, and I'm only 47, and I've been working professionally since, I started, at 11, 12, cutting lawns, but 16 years old, I'm a waiter at Ponderosa. Ponderosa. I
worked at a Ponderosa.
You worked at Ponderosa.
I did.
I was a waiter.
Yeah.
Red apron and a bow tie, and it was fantastic. So I've been working, my entire adult life. There's barely been any seasons where I have not been working. I kind of put it in two categories. Like the first category is where you find a lot of your identity in your work. And then for me, I had a big crashing, failure moment where I planned a big giant event. It didn't go very well, and then I realized, wait a minute, my identity is not in what I do. Right. It's in who I am. All of that kind of stuff. And so then it's kind of been post that. So, with professional and work world, for some of you, you're thinking about a transition that you're about to go through, or some of you may have just been laid off or been asked to leave, and your whole world is crashing down. Yeah. Your whole world is crashing down. It's just so hard. When I announced that I was leaving the church I planted in Central Michigan, like you talked about, the emotional toll, right, the physical toll, the mental toll. When you plant something, when you start a business, you plant a church, you start something from nothing, it's like,
it's a lot of work.
A lot of work. It's birthing,
like,
your child.
Yes.
It's it's you care so desperately for it, and you want it to succeed. And when I knew that my season was coming to a close, which I had known for years that I wasn't going to be the pastor of Thrive Church for years and years. I knew that Central Michigan wasn't going to be my home forever. I went to town to try to raise up. And when I knew that our executive pastor was the person, I was like, okay, we could start going through this. But when I actually announced it, it was emotional. Hard. It was so emotional. It was emotional for me, and then for other people. Because for some, they were really excited for our future, our family's future, and we're moving to Florida, and what a great opportunity. And then for others, they were really hurt by it. As best of intentions that I had, as best that I tried to communicate it, there are people. So when you sometimes leave a position, at your work or some type of professional profession, there are going to be times where your friends and coworkers are hurt or maybe don't get it. And then there's going to be times where maybe they were hurt so bad that they I mean, I think it's the phrase that kids call nowadays when they ghost you.
Yeah.
And you stop hearing from them. Like this is really difficult. So let's talk about some ways that we can respond to people after we communicate our transition.
Wow. So we've communicated the transition and you're getting the gamut of responses, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think, well, first of all, being prepared for that is
Absolutely.
helpful. Going into the transition, knowing no matter what I do, people are going to receive it differently. And so just being prepared for that off the bat. And then, for the ones that are more hurt or don't understand, being open to pursue the conversation a little bit more.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
just, a second conversation, some extra time, even over coffee or tea,
Yep.
that would even be better.
And the crazy thing is, we could have 50 people that were like, "Congratulations, way to
Right.
go, way to go, way to
Yeah,
go."
yeah.
And then there's that one person,
Right.
and we're like, "Oh."
Yeah.
It's like the other night when someone unsubscribed from one of my emails, and I never try to check email late at night. And I'm not the only one, because I've heard Carrie Newhoff talk about this. Even though Carrie has like 5 cajillion people on his email, but that hurts. It hurts. It's like,
Right.
oh, I tried to do everything I can. So I think for me, the principle is like, be as above board as you possibly can.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that. I
Choose
think,
words that are going to speak life into people, and like you said, sip the coffee and just listen to the hurt.
and know that, for some people, it's just going to take them time to process through that, because your transition can mean a transition for them too.
Yes.
So they've got to change, whatever they're doing, if it's a coworker or, even somebody that you are in relationship through work or something. If you're going through a transition and you're leaving, especially, that affects them and causes a transition for them too. So just kind of like you had to think and process through and navigate, feelings
Yep.
and actions and stuff. They're going to have to do that too. And some people it takes longer.
So true. So true. I think some super practical steps I think of, like one, be real,
Right.
be real, like
Yeah.
as much as you can, without hurting or offending or doing those kind of things, but, just be as real as you can.
Right.
Two, have those voice-to-voice conversations, make that list so you don't leave people out. That happened to me about 10 years ago. I forgot to tell somebody about a big transition.
Yeah.
And I can't even believe I did it. I can't believe I forgot them. And they were so hurt. So be real, make that list. And then 3, do the hard work. Call people voice to voice.
Yeah,
I mean, I can remember when I, put in my resignation at Thrive, I can still see the park in my head that I was at, where I was on the phone for 5 hours that day. And I just walked in circles as I talked to people, and, and I kind of let them know. And then be open. If people want to meet, ask about what you're doing or what's happening
Yep.
or what's going on, those kind of things. And then lastly, I was just coaching a leader about this the other day. As you walk through transitions, they're going to be emotionally exhausting, whether it's good or bad, whether it's exhilarating or it's
Right.
down. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Make sure you make time to be there.
Some self-care.
Make sure that you make self-care an absolute priority.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be, even if you're going to a great promotion or you're moving to a great place, like it's just, your whole life is being interrupted.
Right.
There is so much we could talk about this.
Yes.
And so
Yeah,
I
so
know we
much.
just barely scratched the surface. We're going to put those links to the podcast and the books in the show notes. Do we call them the show notes? Is there something? Yes, the producer is shaking his head. Yes, we call them the show notes. We're going to put them all in there. I can't thank you enough for listening to the Speak with People podcast. We really believe that words matter. And so we want to help you become a more effective, healthy communicator. And so we hope that this podcast helps with that. If you have any ideas or suggestions about different ways or forms of communication that we could talk about on this podcast that would help you in the place of life that you're in, email us, jason@speakwithpeople.com. jason@speakwithpeople.com, because I would love to know. Hey, before you leave, I just want to make sure you know about a couple things coming up in the Speak with People world. On Monday night, November 28th, we have a live recording of our Words Matter night. This is going to be great. It's our Speak with People keynote, where I'm going to be speaking. It'll be a night filled with fun and laughter, but hope. And so if you're in the Tampa area, We would love for you to join us. Information's on the website, speakwithpeople.com. And lastly, one of the best things you can do towards the end of the year is look at some coaching. Make sure you head to speakwithpeople.com and look into how coaching could help you bust through your communication or your leadership lid and be able to communicate words in such a way that people will lean in, respond, and grow as a leader and communicator. See you next week. Thank you again for listening, for sharing this podcast. Like, I get texts from friends who say that they copied the link and sent it to a bunch of friends, and that absolutely means the world. Thanks for leaving a review, and we hope that this week you will take the time to breathe life into someone with your words. We'll see you next week.